We're starting.
Okay.
Facts matter.
Let me know if
Listening
you
to
can't hear.
WCPT
Let's make sure that we can hear her.
820.
Thanks.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you today on this fabulous Friday. Fabulous Friday. What are you going to be doing this weekend? Call me, let me know. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. I'm coming to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Let's talk about this debt ceiling, everybody. It is upon us. Can you believe next week really will be June? So, next week will be June. Next weekend is Memorial Day weekend, and then after that, June 1st. That is D-Day, deadline day. What do you think is going to happen? What is on the line? The White House is hopeful that they will be able to avoid defaults, but what does that mean? Who got the short end of the stick? Is it the poor? That is what Bernie Sanders said. You better not let that happen. But will that happen? And what about the 14th Amendment powers? What is it in that 14th Amendment that freed blacks from slavery, that put us back into servitude if we misbehaved, if we got imprisoned? What is it about this 14th Amendment that could save us from default? And then we're going to start off talking about this abortion pill, the so-called abortion pill. It's actually a pill. Mifepristone is a pill that is used to help resolve miscarriages. Oftentimes, when you have a miscarriage, you might not know it, or you might be feeling badly. I've never had one, praise the Lord. But from what I hear, you can have a lot of cramping and whatnot, and the embryo or even the fetus won't be naturally expelled, so they will use this drug to help to resolve the pregnancy so the mother's life will not be endangered. So there's more than one use for the so-called abortion pill, but that, whether you'll be able to have access to that or not, is going to be back before the court. And so now the question is, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? I mean, will women be able to hold on to their reproductive rights? And their health, because remember, our health is at the center. Our reproductive system is at the center of our health. When as a young girl, when you're moving into womanhood, you must then go to another doctor. You can't go to your pediatrician anymore because you have another set of issues. So it's a little bit more complex. Hello, Yvonne. Hello, Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia. Hello, Daryl. Hello, everybody. Hello, Samantha. Hey, Barbara Bacon, Linear Bob. I want you all to call me and let's talk about, what do you think that we will be able to hold on to the right to have access to mifepristone, which is more than 50% of the terminated pregnancies in this country are not surgical. They are done with this pill. So call me, 773-763-9278. What do you think about that? And then, of course, we'll be talking about this debt ceiling. What are the consequences of default? And what do you think is going to happen? I mean, they are hard at work. The House, which, is the power of the purse, and the White House are hard at work, and they say they're making progress. But who's going to be cut? Will your Social Security be cut? Medicare, Medicaid? These cuts are on the backs of the poor, of working people. Think about that, everybody, as they are saying, as someone is celebrating no default. Whose default is that? Who's going to get dealt out of this deal? Who's going to get hurt? So call me at 773-763-9278 before we hear from Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams. I want to know what your thoughts are about all of this. What do you think is going to happen here? Who is going to get hurt? Somebody's going to get hurt. I just hope that it's not us. Today, we are looking at Ukraine. Ukrainian President Zelensky will travel to Japan to attend the G7 summit in person, a stark display of confidence and Western solidarity as he seeks to keep crucial support from allied nations, as he seeks to keep that support flowing. A 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck the South Pacific today, triggering a tsunami warning for nearby nations, Fiji among them. The U.S. Tsunami Warning Center initially issued a tsunami alert for coast within and around 620 miles of the epicenter. Let's hope that that does not happen, everybody. A week after Senator Dianne Feinstein returned to the Senate after a roughly 3-month absence, questions are swirling about her fitness for office. The 89-year-old Democrat had been recovering from shingles at home in California and had been absent from Capitol Hill since February. Feinstein's office confirmed yesterday that she experienced broader health complications following her shingles diagnosis, contradicting an earlier denial from the senator herself, sending her so much love. God bless her. Those complications included Ramsay-Hunt syndrome and encephalitis. She has really been struggling. And there were a lot of questions about her health, about her mental health, about the health of her brain, because it appeared that she didn't quite know that she'd been gone for 3 months. Bless her heart. Disney is scrapping plans to build a $1 billion office complex in Florida. That's a lot of money after everybody, more than 2,000 jobs, citing changing business conditions. In Chicago, we expect to have a high of 70 degrees and showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 60 degrees, partly cloudy. In the NBA, the Nuggets 108, the Lakers 103. Wow. Do you think the Lakers are going to be able to come back? LeBron James says as long as you have to play 4 games, you always have 4 opportunities to win. We're going to see. And tonight, the Heat will be playing the Celtics in the NHL. Who's going to get that Stanley Cup? I don't know, but it's been an exciting series. Panthers 3, the Hurricanes 2. Tonight, the Golden Knights will be facing off against the Stars. In Major League Baseball, the Twins will be facing off against the Angels. The Guardians 3, the White Sox won yesterday, and the Cubs will be facing the Phillies later on today. Those are just some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, the author of the book, I See You, Sis. Everybody go online. Go to Facebook, YouTube. Go to Amazon and get that book. It's going to bless you. It certainly has blessed me. Pastor Tisha Dixon Williams, how can we worship with you on Sunday, first of all?
Good morning, everyone. Yes, you can worship with us on YouTube, the First Baptist Church of Bridgehampton channel. Please make sure to subscribe. And you can worship with us every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Wonderful. What is the good news? You know we need some.
We need some. I want to talk today about The Purge. I know that doesn't sound like good news because the movie sound is so scary, right? The Purge. But I want to ask someone, do you remember falling and scraping your knee or your elbow when you were little?
Yes.
Do you remember that? All you wanted was a Band-Aid. Somehow, as children, we thought a Band-Aid was the cure-all for any cut we had. Don't clean it, don't wash it, don't even touch it. Just give me a Band-Aid and let me get back on my bike. But as we get older, we realize that a Band-Aid is just a cover-up for what you've already cleaned. It didn't heal the cut, nor did it ease the pain, and it certainly didn't treat the potential infection. And you know what? We go through life much in the same way, covering up what needs to heal. Old wounds, hurts, relationships, sordid business affair, our past, all situations that we would much rather put a Band-Aid on than treat them. I'm reminded of Psalm 51 where David says, have mercy upon me, O Lord, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according unto the multitude of thy tender mercies, blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity and cleanse me from sin. David had been wounded. Not only is he wounded, he's done his fair share of wounding. However, he's not physically wounded, but rather spiritually wounded, mentally wounded, emotionally wounded. And I've come to find out that physical wounds heal much quicker and are much more superficial than spiritual wounds. However, David's wound was self-inflicted. An affair with Bathsheba, a married woman, resulted in a surprise pregnancy. And to put a Band-Aid on his boo-boo, David attempts to trick her husband Uriah into laying with her. When his pathetic plot plunders, David resorts to murder. By sending Uriah to the front line of battle, he dies. And David supposes his subversion serves as a solution to Annalise Keating's subject, How to Get Away with Murder. It isn't until he's confronted by the prophet Nathan that he realizes his folly and his trespass against God. He goes on to say, "For I know my transgressions, and my sin is always before me." You see, you may be able to cover the wound, but you always know it's there. Here, David admits to his wrongs and confesses that above all, he sinned against God. That's the first step in healing. You have to acknowledge that you have a problem. Many of us never get clarity about our situations because of our unaddressed issues in our lives. And as a friend of mine always says, what you don't cry out as a child, you'll act out as an adult. Some of our issues and our behavior repulses God, and let me caution you that it might not be the behaviors you think they are. And God is not able to just bypass what you've done because God can't compromise God's character to make us feel better. But this is what I love. There's still an opportunity to purge. There's still an opportunity to get out of, to get rid of all of the things that weigh you down, all of the things that make you hurt. Because really deep down, we've got to get to the root of our behavior. Our behavior is only a symptom of a greater diagnosis. My friend Dr. Hunt says this, that trauma has no expiration date, and we will repeat what we do not repair. I want to say that one more time for someone who's suffering from trauma. Trauma has no expiration date, and we're bound to repeat what we don't repair. The way we behave is usually symptomatic of a larger issue. There's a root to the fruit. That's why we have to use caution when we judge other people. You don't know the trauma or the root cause of what is fueling their behavior. I recently read a post that says when you finally learn that a person's behavior has more to do with their own internal struggle than it ever did with you, that's when you learned grace. And aren't you grateful for a God that understands our internal struggle and gives us grace? While some behaviors require a move of God, I believe there are things that we can do to encourage other people. A kind word, a prayer, a hug, a warm smile, a listening ear, and above all else, love. That's what I want you to know today, that the cure for whatever ails you, the cure for what is depressing you, the cure for what is causing you anxiety is love. Not just love of other people, but love of self. The reality is we forgive other people long before we forgive ourselves. So we are reminded, above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sins. In the end, here's the good news. Love is the only Band-Aid that covers and cures. And that's the good news.
Amen. Amen. We repeat what we don't repair. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is so true. Mm-hmm. That is so true. That is so true. And I think when you really look at, when you understand that, you view people and you view yourself with much more compassion. Not that you give folks a pass, but you do give them grace. You say, that's, look at where they cut. Look at what happened. And the thing is, most of us don't know what makes us who we are. You just don't know. You don't know. Oh, if I were her, if I were he, I would. No, you don't know. You don't even know their story. I have to tell you, I was reading a biography of my father, and it's the only authorized biography that exists, Marshall Frady, a white fellow who grew up in Greenville, South Carolina at the same time as my dad. And interestingly enough, he knew many of my father's white relatives because because my grandmother was raised in part by her white grandfather. I mean, it's just, you never know how life is going to work. But in the South, we're all kind of smushed up together, right? So he had a keen understanding of my father and of the racial politics and the racial politics of his family, all of that. And it was only when I read that book, and it took me a couple of years to read it, because for some reason, I've always known about, the pain of my father's origins, having been born out of wedlock, not having been acknowledged by his father fully, all of that. But it was only then that I saw that he didn't go to live with his mother until he was 13. He never, ever said that to me. Ever. And I said, what was that like? Because I only know being with you and Mom. But that was something neither of my parents knew. But it was something they never, ever, ever discussed.
Yes.
And it made it so I saw them through different lenses, because I didn't find this out about either of them until I was in my 30s. Oh yeah. They never, ever, ever talked about it. You know, and you just do biographies of your parents, everybody, and of your families.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew. How can we get your book? I see you, sis. I can see clearly now. I see you, sis. How can we get I see you, sis?
I See You, Sis is available on Amazon. And I See You, Sis, Inspirations from Heroic Women of the Bible, Hidden in Plain Sight, is available on Amazon.
I love Dr. Tisha Dixon Williams. I can't wait to see you this summer. Yay, girl.
I'm looking forward.
Absolutely. Dr. Shanina Knighton, one of the girls, infection preventionist, college lecturer, registered nurse. You know, I was combing through your Instagram, and I love your Instagram feed. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA, because it gives me snapshots and it makes me curious, Dr. Shanina Knighton. And so I'm curious about gut health. My father's got Parkinson's, and as I've been doing a lot of research on it, they say there's a tie between your gut health and Parkinson's. You know, I can see the difference. When he eats sugar, his speech becomes slurred, he's tired, and it impacts him for a day. It's amazing. But we're seeing a rise in colon cancer. I'm hearing a lot more about that today than I did certainly when I was a child, or even in my teen and early adulthood. So what is it about our gut health? I mean, what should we be eating, like say from day to day, to try to optimize our gut health?
Good morning.
Good
So
morning.
I think the biggest is to understand there's that saying that you are what you eat. And I know we talk about so many different regards, and so today is not to bully on meat or bully on one particular entity just within itself, but it is to raise awareness that when someone says you are what you eat, really thinking about what it is that we're consuming. I know I've brought this up before, but even, let's say, traditionally back in the day, or like, you know, with farmers and someone raising animals, it's interesting because I have a friend that literally her grandmother still manages a farm. And so with that, what will happen is they actually take care of their animals, and they actually have their own personal ceremonies and relationships with what it is that they'll consume. Well, nowadays, we understand that chemicals are a thing when it comes to preparing the ground, like let's say for fruits and vegetables. We understand pesticides, you know, is the issue. We also know that when it comes to animals, you know, animals get sick, and so antibiotics, antifungals, antivirals, vaccines, in order for them to receive, you know, or be preventing illnesses, does prevail. You know, I was going to say I have 2 dogs, and I'll kid you not, the initial shot, you know, for when they were puppies, their list is actually longer than a pediatric list, you know, in terms of their series of vaccines that they potentially may need. And there's things that we don't think about because humans aren't necessarily at risk for it right away, such as the parvovirus, which can be very deadly for dogs. So I'm just bringing that up, Santita, to say that we don't think about how does that impact our gut. So something that was ill, that was treated, directly goes into our body, okay, with its medicine. And then how does that then, in turn, treat our bodies over time? The other thing, not picking again on meat, but sugar. So sugar, think about it. If animals consume, like let's say, some sort of sugar, if it's pork, which we know has a attachment diabetes because of an ingredient called alga, we know, again, that if we're consuming these items, what does that do in terms of increasing our risk? Sugar alone, and I've talked about this before, that 75 grams of sugar, which could literally be a cup of coffee and a pastry, consumed at one time will decrease your immune system for 5 hours. That still impacts your gut. But what will happen is that our stomach has a certain level of candida, which is fungus. So that is in our stomach. We have a certain level of it. And let's say the number that should be there is about 20%. If you're eating a lot of sugar, your stomach loves sugar. Fungus loves sugar and feeds off of sugar. So if you're over-consuming, what happens is you start to then have an over-accumulation of fungus. And your balance is off. And as a result of your balance is off, have you heard people be told that when they have a UTI, to cut down on sugar? Or when I say UTI, I'm speaking of urinary tract infection. They might be told to cut down on sugar.
Hold that thought.
About this.
Hold that thought. I've got a hard break, but I'm going to give you a few minutes on the other side of the break because I want you to talk about that because you have constantly gone back to sugar. When I was Dr. Robert Atkins' patient, I was actually his patient when I lived in New York, and I lost like 90 pounds in a few months cutting out sugar. And I did feel better, and it reset my palate forever. So it's something for us to think about, everybody. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show with Dr. Shanina Knight, and then we're going to be talking about this so-called abortion pill. Will you still have access to it? Back in just a minute on the Santita Jackson Show. Whoo-wee. Pearl, you get me with this stuff that oh my gosh, that you start talking about.
I'm knowing it's so crazy. Just like want to give a good picture, but finding a way to give a good picture without getting too sciencey is what I would say, or trying to make something that's digestible and that connection of how it's related to the body. But many people, like when they get to Canada and they have to go get some sort of antifungal in order to be able to clean up the yeast, and they're told to decrease their intake of sugar, they don't connect the two.
Well, remember when the World Health Organization wanted to battle obesity 20 years ago, about 20 years ago, their biggest opponent was the U.S. sugar lobby.
Oh, yeah.
I read that in The Guardian. Of course, I didn't read that in a major American
Attorney
newspaper.
Patillo's on the line.
Thank you, Paul. Right, and I never forgot that. And I said, this is why they hounded Dr. Atkins. Because he also wanted us to get away from food that had MSG, that had all these chemicals, and so did my surgeons when I had my weight loss surgery, which has ultimately been quite successful. But I was also in another place because I've been able to sustain it. Praise the Lord. And I have to tell you, not that I will never ever have sugar again, but when you understand what refined white sugar does to you, you would be very, very, very careful. And just the ties between this product and your health, incredible. And you've been saying this since the start of the pandemic. And when Dr. Deb contracted COVID, and when I got it, you said, whatever you do, don't do sugar. Get away from it. I was like, okay. Fortunately for me, for various and sundry reasons, I was craving salt. You said, do not do sugar. Don't do it. It will slow down your recovery process and will give you some other complications. Never forgot that. And we shared that with everybody on the air. We shared that with you. So it's something to think about, not just think about, but act upon. Doctor, have you been on Robert Patillo's show? I think that you have been, right? Attorney Patillo's show.
I have not. No.
Oh, Robert Patillo?
Yes, ma'am.
You know what? You need to have her on your show. She's an infection preventionist. There are only a few thousand of them in the world, and she's African American. Tremendous personal narrative herself. First person in her family to come out of high school, let alone go to college and get a PhD. And she is...
Totally.
Infection prevention is her thing. That's what she is. She's an infection preventionist. And when you see the things, when you hear the things that she has to tell you, it will blow your mind. Make you a little paranoid, but...
That's it. That's exactly.
Oh, I'm going to send you her information. All right. Yeah, got you on this show. You got to go. It is a great show, and you should tell Roland about her as well.
Will do.
Okay, Roland Martin, because I just think people need to know about you, Dr. Knighton. I really do.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jesse. And I will tell you, I just become
30 seconds, and we have attorneys Patillo and Hoffler on the line so far.
Great.
that when we're doing the work of infection prevention, our goal is to prevent things so the public doesn't have to hear about it. But it still doesn't mean that the public shouldn't be prepared.
Mm-hmm. Hold on, stand by. We'll give you about 3 minutes, and you just go. Go for it.
10 seconds.
Okay, thank you. Stand by. Hey, everybody, stand by.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. We're going to be talking about mifepristone. What is that? That's the so-called abortion pill. It's also used to resolve miscarriages. Oftentimes, women need to expel the fetus, the embryo, and all of the and all that has been formed for that, for the embryo or the fetus. And so, and if you don't expel it naturally, you could kill the mother. I mean, there's a lot. There's more than one use for this pill. And indeed, most terminated pregnancies are not surgical now. They are prompted by this pill. Or this medical protocol. We're going to be talking about that because will women have access to it? Will women have access to it? Will we now strike down abortion in the United States? What does that mean? And then at the top of the hour, the debt ceiling. What is that going to mean? What's being compromised away? Something's happening because the White House and Speaker McCarthy are negotiating, and the GOP. They're holding the line, but Senator Bernie Sanders and even some members of the GOP have said, look, we need to exercise the 14th Amendment and get this taken care of. You can negotiate whatever it is that you want to negotiate later on. But Bernie Sanders takes it another step further. He said, you will not deal with this debt on the backs of the poor. Don't do it. Don't cut Medicare. Don't cut Social Security. So I want to know what your thoughts are. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, July 15th through the 19th, Rainbow Push International Conference. I want you to be there, everybody. And Dr. Shanina Knighton, you were right into it. And, oh my gosh, talking about this processed sugar. Give us a couple more minutes of that because, I was looking at your post about colon cancer, which is on the rise. And I was wondering about our gut health and what it is that we can do to be proactive about protecting our guts.
Yes. So I think the biggest thing, Santita, is like really understanding that we are what we eat. And I was mentioning sugar as being one of the main culprits of that because for every 75 grams, it lowers your immune system for 5 hours. And was sharing that was equivalent of a cup of coffee and a pastry at the same time. And then the fact that we don't think about, let's say, juice and other things that add up on top of that. We also tend to ignore that, yes, carcinogens do exist. And when I say carcinogens are things that can lead to cancer that may show up in our food. So, for example, caramel coloring has a high attachment to carcinogens. And so when you look up carcinogens and some of their work, when they've done testing in animals around certain ingredients, they have increased tumors inside of mice. And so when those things are put inside of our food, then we don't think about that correlation that they also may have with cancer. And so I bring that up to individuals because when we think about gut health, when we think about the cancers that exist, the question is then, what is it that we're consuming that is potentially attached to cancer? And so it is very important for people to look up ingredients that not foods, look up ingredients that are linked to cancer. because looking up ingredients that are linked to cancer, you will then have an awareness and be more vigilant about looking at them on the back of foods that contain labels. When you are consuming fruits and vegetables, as anyone would say, that is your safest bet. We do understand that pesticides exist. Some pesticides are also attached to cancers. However, lowering the risk as associated would mean that you're not intentionally eating things that would be leading to, that would have those carcinogens that would lead to cancer. And I know we won't go into details about this today, Santita, but I always bring up to individuals that we all have, like, let's say, genes within our body, and there's certain, let's say, predispositions when it comes to heredity that may make us reflect certain things. So, for example, Santita, if Parkinson's runs through your family, there might be certain things that would predispose you to, let's say, having it, opposed to someone that might have it in their body as a gene, but it may not necessarily be expressed for them to show up. So heredity does play, or family history plays a big part in regards to our health just within itself. So always encourage individuals that when we are talking about gut health, it's also very important to be aware of our family history as it relates to gut health, because if you have, let's say, colon cancer or some sort of stomach cancer that has been prevalent within your family, that means you will want to go get checked out. And so oftentimes the indicator of cancer is something called polyps. So when people go and they get their colonoscopy, they're checking for these things called polyps, which could be a predisposition to cancer. And I'm bringing that up particularly because we're talking about gut health, which is important, but it's also important for us to think about what preventative measures can we take. And that's one, asking about family history to find out potentially who in your family circle has had these types of cancers. And then two, the preventative piece is going to make sure that you are getting checked out and letting someone know that you want to make sure that you are not predisposed to it, because you may have it in your family history. And so those are preventative measures. As I mentioned, prevention is better than treatment. Preventing cancer is better than treating cancer. So the goal is to try to figure out what things can be done to understand what is your risk and what can be your risk-lowering measures.
Dr. Shanina Knighton, everybody, please take good care of yourselves. Hey, Dr. Nina, Heydrnina, that's her handle on social media. Follow her. Get on Instagram. Follow her right now, because I love it, love it, love it. And love you, Dr. Shanina Knighton. So glad to be with you today, and you have a great weekend. Sending you and your family much love.
Yes, you too.
Absolutely. We have got attorney Robert Patillo and attorney C.K. Hoffler as we are talking about just, I guess, reproductive rights. It just shockingly, people were shocked when Roe v. Wade was overturned. But now they're going to get another pass at this. That is, will you be allowed to use mifepristone? Mifepristone. What is that? That is the so-called abortion pill, but it's used for has far more uses than that. Indeed, let us establish this. Most terminated pregnancies are not done surgically. You use this drug to enact that particular procedure. But you also need it to resolve a miscarriage. Oftentimes, all of the material that is built up with a pregnancy that is unsuccessful does not expel, is not naturally expelled. You have to use mifepristone in order to make that happen. So what's going to happen to women? I mean, will women be charged with murder? Will they be charged with trying to abort when they actually had a miscarriage? I mean, there's a whole lot going on here. And so now I just want to know, what about this Fifth Circuit Court? Many people are saying that they really can't do anything about this, but boy, when you heard their arguments yesterday, they were quite hostile to they were quite hostile to you. You're very clear that they would like to just eliminate your access to this particular drug. So before I pivot to you, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, let me go to you, because I know you between doing your own show, you do Roland Martin show, you're talking to people all day, every day, as is Attorney C.K. Hoffler. She has her show on WAOK like you. She's on Tuesdays at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and then you are on from 1 to 4 every Sunday, 1 to 4. Attorney Robert Patillo, and then you fill in for Roland Martin, and on and on and on. So talk to me. What are you hearing? I mean, do you think Roe v. Wade, the ending of it, took people by surprise? What do you think is going to happen with this particular so-called abortion pill?
Well, I'm not sure why it took people by surprise. There's been a 40-plus year effort by conservatives to change the Supreme Court in such a way that they will be able to overturn such. And I tell people now that if you think Roe versus Wade was a quote-unquote shock, wait until they get a hold of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Wait until they get a hold of what remains of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Fair housing, the public accommodation of everything that we consider the civil rights movement. All of those things will be gutted in the upcoming years. We saw the affirmative action case last fall with regard to college admissions, and we're also seeing politically Republicans are now attacking DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion on down the line. And I think what most people are understanding right now when it comes to reproductive health is this is now going to be a state-by-state battle. We are going back to a Missouri Compromise position in America, where you're going to have states where probably 20 to 24 states that will have full reproductive health care rights for women. And you'll probably have about 25 to 26 states in this country that are racing each other to find out who can be the most restrictive. If you look at some of the banter between Trump and DeSantis now, they've gone from arguing about whether or not there should be rights now to saying, well, I wanted a 6-week ban, and now Trump is saying, well, that's too lenient. We need to get rid of any time period at all. So we're going to start seeing more and more draconian measures around the country. And I'm hoping this inspires people to pay attention to state and local races. We're not changing the Supreme Court anytime soon. We're not stacking the court. Clarence Thomas is getting impeached. Nobody's stepping down. No one is resigning. The court is the court that we have. But what we can change is state legislatures around the country. And right now, Republicans during that Obama period, they picked up 1,044 seats. They have constitutional majorities in many states across the South, despite the demographics. We just saw North Carolina, where their Senate, because they have a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate, was able to overturn the governor's veto on their abortion bill there. We see in Tennessee the expulsion of black legislators, Minnesota the expulsion of trans legislators, Wisconsin the attempts to remove a Democrat from the Supreme Court there. So we're going to have to stop just paying attention to presidential races and get involved in state and local races, because this new court is going to be pushing federalism down our throats, and because of that, the backstop of the federal government will no longer be there to support us. So we're going to have to win these races state by state, district by district, city by city, town by town, ward by ward, and people want to maintain the rights they believe that they should have.
Indeed, and that is why every single race at every single level matters. Because you elect judges at every single level, and they impact how we live. It's not just the Supreme Court. That's the Supreme Court. That's the last stop. You have a lot, oftentimes we're seeing the Supreme Court, it seems like they're in league with each other, Robert. They're kicking things back to the state courts, or to these lower courts, to the Fifth Circuit, to the courts of appeals, and all of that. And I just got a book, Shadow Docket. I can't wait to read about these stealth rulings. Have you heard about that book, Robert?
I have indeed.
Okay. What about these stealth rulings? What are they?
What we're seeing around the country is that many courts are either taking cases and just simply burying them and allowing them to expire de facto, or they are making rulings on. Maybe CK can expound on this more. They're making rulings where they are where the top line of what we see in the ruling. Once you dig down in, there's a lot of dicta, there's a lot of dissenting opinions, and those end up being what carries more of the case than the top line of it. And I think that what we often find out is that years and years down the line, we'll finally read through some of these things we find, and once they're challenged by the lower court, because things go to the Supreme Court, but then they have to be enforced and interpreted by the lower court justices, that once they start getting interpreted by those circuit courts and those district courts, we find out that what we believe that ruling actually meant is far different than the way it's being implemented. And because Republicans have spent so much time taking over the judiciary, not just stealing the seat from Merrick Garland to get a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court, but people forget, and with all the clownery and buffoonery of President Trump, between him and Mitch McConnell, they were able to appoint nearly 300 federal judges during his time in office. We are living in the era of Trump. When it comes to the judiciary, we will be doing so for the next 20+ years, and this is what makes it so difficult to fight through the same way that Charles Hamilton Houston and Thurgood Marshall did through the federal judiciary to get to achieve rights. Because now we have a more conservative court now than what we had in the 1950s.
Attorney C.K. Hoffler, what is going to happen with this pill? I mean, I want to hear from you and Aaron. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that they are going to say you can't have access to it? And how will that impact women who've had miscarriages? You know, oftentimes you don't know you've had a miscarriage, right? I mean, I've not had one, but you know, the thing is, I mean, what is this?
Well, what this is a sad day, because it's a sad day for women's ability to control what happens to the reproductive system. And so it is a sad day from that vantage point. People are looking at it from just looking at the abortion issue, but it's much broader than abortion.
Well, hold on one second,
CK.
To do with hold on, because let me ask you this, because just what popped into my mind was mansplaining. You know, now I've got to convince a man of what's going on in my body. Right?
Well, there's so many levels of this and why this is so unjust. So on the one hand, you have women who will not be able to dictate, to determine what will happen to their bodies in terms of their reproductive systems. And even if there's a threat of death. And if you are, I just want to be clear, if you are someone of means, you will simply get on a plane or maybe charter a plane or get in a car or maybe charter a car and hire someone to drive you to another state so you can get whatever medical procedure you need to get, or you'll just go to Canada, or you'll go wherever you need to go if you're of means. So this discussion really has nothing to do in terms of the victims and those who will be impacted. Women of means across all color lines. Women of means will do what they need to do to get this done. The vast majority of women in this country are not women of means. And so for the rest of the women, whether they be black and brown women or poor white women, indigenous women who may not have the means, when they have a medical reason, which could be a miscarriage or some type of abnormality or some type of medical condition, which would mandate from a medical standpoint either the abortion pill or a surgical abortion. In some states, they won't be able to get it. So if this pill, which really accounts for 50% of abortions, if this pill is outlawed, which it can be, and which if it gets to the U.S. Supreme Court level, I predict it will be, because this is one of the mantras of the conservative agenda. They want to get rid of this abortion issue, and that's how they perceive it. So this is no different for them than saying abortion is illegal because this is the abortion pill. So I predict if it escalates up to the U.S. Supreme Court, Santita, unfortunately, there's a strong likelihood that it will be banned. And so what we will have are justices making a determination, people making a determination, not medical determinations. This is a medical issue. The FDA, they are challenging, in fact, with the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, charged with looking at all of these medications and saying whether they should be approved or not They're challenging those decisions of medical professionals and saying, we want to ban it for a political agenda. But the victims of it are women. And we have less to say about our bodies than our grandmothers did. So this is really, really bad. It's not a question of whether you're for or against. If you're a woman and you're in a position where you need to have an abortion, or we can call it something different, because of your medical condition, you've had a miscarriage. If you're having a miscarriage, there are things that have to be done. Or if Lord forbid, if your child has died in your body, and your body is not excreting your child, you need assistance with that. And if the law said you can't do that, you could die. And so this is just almost, to me, it's a tragic discussion to have, that the justices of the U.S. Supreme Court will be ultimately ruling on this issue. That you got when we see federal judges in the federal circuit taking such staunch positions saying this has got to go, as we see in Texas, this judge in Texas, and when we see inconsistent rulings, it's escalating up to the U.S. Supreme Court, because that's one path of escalating up to the U.S. Supreme Court. But as Robert made the point, this has been part of an agenda that's being pushed for decades. Decades. For decades, there was an agenda to overturn Roe versus Wade. In those decades, the abortion pill has been developed and has been a viable medical solution when women have to get an abortion or seek to get an abortion. So this is not a new issue. This is just something that's now coming to fruition, and the courts are aligned. There are so many conservative federal judges on the bench. Yes, the former President Trump administration, they were able to put in place more than 300 judges. 300. And so for people, for regular, everyday people, for all of us, we feel the impact of it when there's a decision. When there's a decision that's going to, and then we're saying, oh my goodness, it's in a state where it's impacting what happens in that state, because these are all state rights. But when it escalates up to the U.S. Supreme Court, if the U.S. Supreme Court rules and says that this pill is illegal, that will be the law of the land.
Hold on
so
a
it's
second.
no longer going to be just this state, that state. That would be the law of the land.
Absolutely. These last 3 minutes belong to you, Aaron. I mean, there are just so many moving parts here. And it seems
there are many moving parts.
It just seems like we're on track for this to be eliminated as an option for women.
It may be eliminated as an option for women. We have an unlikely ally, I think, in this, and that is the pharmaceutical companies that manufacture and profit off of this wildly successful and safe medication that women around the world use, that the World Health Organization approves of, and that the FDA approves of, and many, many, many esteemed physicians across the United States prescribe to patients for medical care. So we may have an ally that is unusual in that sense, because I think these judges and the Supreme Court will start getting calls from their pharmaceutical contributors who are saying this doesn't make sense for us, right? So this may be a bridge too far for the corporate America that is making huge profits off of women's health care in this regard, right? So I just want to bring that up as a point of potential pushback from this on the other side.
Well, that's a big point,
the risk
Aaron.
for physicians. And the risk for physicians who prescribe this medication that will no longer be approved by the FDA. Will there be more lawsuits against physicians who do prescribe it? And if something does happen, it continues to put doctors and patients at risk, because this is healthcare. Abortion is the prescription to save a woman's life in many cases. If you talk to an OBGYN, that is the remedy to save a woman's life in certain medical conditions, unfortunately. And that's the worst case scenario in those spaces. And those doctors and patients have to make difficult, life-threatening decisions. And none of that should be inside the halls of government.
But you know what? You bring up something that's the elephant in the room in this corporatist society in which we live, and corporatist government, quite frankly. Big Pharma. They control everything. They control the conversations. They control the media. Say what you will about Tucker Carlson, he was absolutely right. That was one of his last rants before he was fired. He said, look, They give you the parameters of the conversations, the questions you can and cannot ask about any kind of drug. I don't care, not just one drug that everyone's talking about, anyone. That you can't say anything because they are the big advertisers. And, you know, they have all the major health organizations around the world, which they bought up and bought out, paid off. They have them on their side. I mean, 30 seconds, Aaron. I mean, why did you look at Big Pharma? Because that's big. No pun.
Well, I always look at Big Pharma as someone with a chronic illness who, you know, my medical decisions can be life and death if I decide to drink a pop or or not. So I depend on those folks for my medication every single day. So it's a big part of my analysis. And I think it's worth noting that they have been able to exert some pressure on other issues like this in the past. And, you know, the progress that conservatives or Democrats were making on an issue get shut down because Big Pharma says no. For example, look at the cost of insulin. There's a big push to make it 0. There's a big push to make it 35. Now it's 35, but only for certain people.
I've got 10 seconds.
Because it's a bridge too far, right? So pharma makes a lot of our policy choices.
They do on every level. They control the debate. Let's talk about the 14th Amendment and the debt ceiling. What's up with that? Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show, July 15th through the 19th, Rainbow Push International Conference. You got to be there. Back in just a minute. Whew, thank you so much for that. All that you all were great. Thank you so much. Okay, let's get into this 14th Amendment then. All right.
Hey, Santita, you know, when we talk about Big Pharma, you know, in my opioid litigation, I mean, I sued Big Pharma. I've sued Big Pharma so much. But this is the one time that I suppose I'm going to be aligned with Big Pharma. How about that?
Well, you know, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests, right?
Right, and I don't view them as the enemy. I view them as, you know, with very parts of litigation that they've been detrimental to various communities. But on this issue, we'll have to see. We'll have to see because they will stand to lose so much money. And as we know, money makes the world go round and round. So we'll see.
Well, will it go round in circles or will it fly high like a bird up in the sky? Thank you, Billy Preston. Billy Preston.
You know, I had to go round in circles.
Come on now. I had to go there. Come on now. You know we all loved it. Come on. Please. Playing that organ. Oh, my gosh. You know, I used to host the open mic, you guys. CK, you would know Sylvia's in Harlem. And they had she opened in the late 90s, Sylvia's also, which was, because she ended up buying up the whole block. What an entrepreneur. Mrs. Sylvia Woods and her husband, well, they both were incredible. And so I started hosting the open mic, the gospel open mic on Sunday nights from 7 to 12 midnight. Oh my gosh. I got kind of pulled into it. You would see Melba Wilson, Melba's, which has become one of the hottest restaurants in New York. She was her maitre d', the concierge, beautiful, beautiful young woman who absolutely is a tremendous restaurateur. And she's one of my dearest friends. And so she called me, girl, I need, you know, my host is not there. This is not going to be there tonight. I need your help. I'm like, oh, okay. I thought I was going to die at the end of it. I was so exhausted because you have to sing and host and blah, blah, blah. I ended up doing it for several years. And what was amazing to me was just watching the people who come in. And one of the persons who came in
Attorney Fancher's on the line.
Thank you. Was Billy Preston. I mean, the first time I saw him, I thought I was going to pass out. I was like, oh, he can do the rest of the show. That Billy Preston was something else, everybody. Woo. And you know what? He was the uncredited fifth Beatle. They were going to break up before their last album. And because they had such regard for him as a musician, he was able to go between Ringo, Paul, John, and George and get them together. And when you see that album, When you see the concert that they did on the rooftop, he was in the back, in the corner, on the organ, and he's also an uncredited Rolling Stone. He never got the money and he never got the credit, but he basically produced their albums. Oh, wow. All that. I think about that, and I think about him not getting the credit. It just it infuriates me today. And you all remember what? Wait a minute. He was in the movie with Nat King Cole. Or was it the W.C. Handy story? What was it? St. Louis Blues. He played the little boy in the movie, but we all remember and love Billy Preston.
Mr. McKee is on the line.
Okay, Dwight McKee, Mark Fancher.
Good morning. Morning.
Okay, and of course we've got Attorney Robert Patillo, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, and Attorney Aaron Connolly. Let's get to it on this 14th Amendment, everybody. You all can say hello. Oh, please, everybody, don't speak all at once.
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Aaron.
Good morning.
Ooh.
Curious on their thoughts on this abortion pill issue as well.
Well, you know, we're gonna pivot into this, but oh boy, this is great. Yeah, but I would love to hear their thoughts on that. But it's just there's so much going on. Robert said he had the Billy Preston record. It would go around in circles. I just remember him on Soul Train doing it, and I thought it was fabulous. Don't you remember Soul Train on Saturdays? Y'all, that was like destination TV for everybody. Soul Train was the most successful syndicated show in the history of American television.
Santita, that's how we learned our dances. That's how we learned about the music and dances, because, you know, it's not like we could go out anywhere, so we had to learn the latest dances and everything on Soul Train.
But that's when you used to have the party at home, you know? Remember?
That's absolutely.
The Soul Train line
we would
at home.
All of that.
Isn't that right, Dwight? Dwight, did you ever do the Soul Train line? Mark, did y'all ever do that? No.
Well, you know, Soul Train started in Chicago. We used to go into local shows.
On Channel 26?
Downtown.
On Channel 26?
Well, I just want to know, though. I just got to know. I have to know. I want to know if Uncle Dwight did he go to the Soul Train thing, and was he one of the dancers? That's what I wanted to know.
Girl. Dwight?
Because the great visionary when it was in Chicago, if you went to the Soul Train show, if you were one of the dancers, because of the great visionary that you are, I'd imagine that you would have been there, because you're a great visionary as a young man, even envisioning how Soul Train was going to explode. And so you were going there to observe this and participate. So I just wanted to get confirmation of that.
Well, I'll have to take it if I said to you.
We're back in 30.
Oh, please call
it wouldn't mean anything to you, but if I say Santita, it'll take it somewhere else. Tell who said it was Santita.
Oh man, I love it. I'm gonna call Vicky Johnson. I'm gonna call Aline. I got some people I can call to ask about you, Dan.
5 seconds.
Yeah, I'm gonna do that.
Well, I used to just sing a commercial.
You know you dance, Mark. Get out of here.
I used to sing a commercial.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Oh my goodness, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show, everybody. It is Friday, May 19th. It's a joy to be with you on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I want to know what you think about the debt ceiling. Apparently there's some progress in these talks, but, you know, Bernie Sanders is saying, look, there might be progress in the talks, but is it truly progress? Because you want to balance, you want to have this debt ceiling agreement on the backs of the poor. You want to cut SNAP, food aid. You want to cut Medicare. You want to cut Social Security. I mean, big cuts when Americans really cannot take any more. So what do you think? What is that going to look like? They talk about the debt ceiling giving us economic catastrophe all over the world. What will it look like to cut people's Social Security by 25% or 22%? What will that look like, snap? I mean, giving people less when they absolutely need more. When they need not more, they need enough to make it from day to day. Think about that. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Let's talk about that on the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about that. Call me at 773-763 WCPT 773-763-9278, and I want you to meet my morning stars on the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page and on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and meet me on Twitter at Santita J. Please, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you today, and I want to hear from you about this debt ceiling. I mean, what is really going on here? What is really going on here? Call me at 773-763-9278. And what about the 14th Amendment? The 14th Amendment freed us from slavery, but it seems like it was an economic decision, everybody. Let's talk about that. 773-763-9278. Let's get to the headlines. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky will travel to Japan to attend the G7 summit in person, a stark display of confidence and Western solidarity as he seeks to keep crucial support from fading from allied nations, everybody. A 7.7 magnitude earthquake struck the South Pacific today, triggering a tsunami warning for nearby nations, including the Fiji Islands. The U.S. Tsunami Warning Center initially issued a statement calling for a tsunami alert for coasts within about 620 miles of the epicenter, but lifted the alert 3 hours after the quake struck the region. A week after Senator Dianne Feinstein returned to the Senate after a roughly 3-month absence, questions are swirling about her fitness for office. The 89-year-old Democrat has been recovering from shingles at home in California, but it turns out that it was more serious than we heard, everybody. She's had broader health complications following her diagnosis, contradicting early reports from herself and her staff. Those complications included Ramsay-Hunt syndrome and encephalitis. Praying for her, everybody. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is sounding optimistic, everybody, as we pivot to this part of the conversation about the direction of debt limit talks. What is being dealt out? Indeed, Bernie Sanders said, don't balance this agreement on the backs of the poor, of working people. So what do you think is going to happen here, everybody? And where does the 14th Amendment come in on this? There are some Republicans who are saying, exercise the 14th Amendment. We cannot mess with the credit of the United States, although Standard & Poor's lowered our rating more than 4,000 days ago, more than 10 years ago. And we don't have that top-notch rating anymore. It's never been raised since it was lowered. Let's talk about that on the Santita Jackson Show in Chicago. A high of 70 degrees, showers. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 60 degrees, partly cloudy. In the NBA, the Nuggets 108, the Lakers 103. Tonight, the Celtics will be playing the Heat, and in the NHL, the Panthers 3, the Hurricanes 2. And tonight, the Golden Knights will be facing off against the Stars. Who's going to be in that Stanley Cup final? We're about to find out, everybody. In Major League Baseball, the Twins will be playing the Angels, the Cubs will be playing the Phillies, and the Guardians 3. The White Sox won last night. If you are a first-time home buyer, I hope you enjoyed that segment yesterday with David Hochberg and Team Hochberg. We have got a lot of work to do, everybody. If you have not owned a home within the past 3 years, you need to call Team Hochberg. You need to call him, your trusted local lender. First-time buyers made up just 26% of the marketplace last year, down from 38% the year before, and numbers that were much higher in prior years. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have said, look, we are unsettled by this because part of the cornerstone of the American economy is your home ownership, and that is those numbers are falling precipitously. So they want to incentivize first-time home buyers with substantially lower rates. Now, those rates can be raised at any time, so you need to get in on this program right now. But if you live in the Chicago area and your total household income is below $105,700 and you've not owned a home, that's important, within the past 3 years, Call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID to see if you qualify for these low interest rates. Now, they can raise these rates at any time, so you need to get with the program today. You can call them at 855-56-DAVID or go to 56david.com and read about it. But I would advise you to call. Let them know what your situation is so that you can find out if you're eligible for this program. Start building some generational wealth. Homeowners tend to beget other homeowners, and on it goes down the line generationally. So let's do that, everybody. Go on and give Team Hochberg a call, because even in this crazy environment, you can own a home. Home ownership is within your grasp. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to visit them at 56david.com. Let's talk about the 14th Amendment and the debt ceiling discussion. U.S. Treasury Secretary Yellen has warned Congress and President Biden that they have only until June 1st, that is not 2 weeks away, everybody, it's a little bit more than a week, to reach a deal to raise the nation's $31.4 trillion borrowing limit. Now, mind you, this is money that's already been spent. We will go into default. And you know what happens when you go into default, or when you're late with your paying off your credit card or paying off your bills. You know, all these payment plans you have, hey, you can't get any more credit. It costs you more money to borrow money. And on and on and on. And what will that mean as more and more of the world are de-dollarizing? What will it mean? And who is going to absorb the shock? Bernie Sanders says, you know what? Poor people are going to absorb the shock. Working class people. So don't do this deal on their backs. But it seems like that might be happening. But what about the 14th Amendment and the debt ceiling talks? We have got, of course, Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Attorney Aaron Connolly, we've got Dwight McKee, Dr. D, and we have got Attorney Mark Fancher. So, Attorney Mark Fancher, why don't you set the table for us? What is going on here? What does the 14th Amendment have to do with our debt ceiling?
It may have nothing to do with it. The 14th Amendment's fourth section reads essentially, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. Okay, that's the relevant portion of it. The origins of that are in the post-Civil War period. There was concern that at some point, if the Congress became dominated by former members of the Confederacy, that they would try and avoid paying the debts that were incurred during the efforts by the Union to fight the Civil War. And they wanted to make sure that those debts were paid. When this has been invoked since then, courts have looked at that, and many of them have limited the application of that provision of the 14th Amendment to something like that, or something in the spirit of, the idea of trying to ensure that bond debts in particular are honored by the U.S. And while the court has said it's broader than, relates to things broader than the debts incurred during the Civil War, it's rarely invoked for anything at all. And so the efforts to try and apply this to an effort to avoid raising the debt ceiling are not squarely on point. And so I'm not sure how far that goes. But beyond that, I think that, one of the benefits of being old is that you've seen a lot of stuff before. And what we're seeing now, this entire scenario, is nothing new or novel. The Republicans do this every few years. They scare the country to death by saying that they're not going to raise the debt ceiling, and their forecasts of doom and catastrophe and all of that. And they play this game right up until the very end, and then they know going into this that they're not going to allow the country to plunge into catastrophe because they know they'll take the blame for it, and they don't want the blame for it. But what they want to do is frighten people enough that they can get the Democratic Party to the negotiating table, and they can make some deals that are in some ways beneficial to their agenda,
And then after they get some things that they want, then they back off and they say, yeah, let's raise it. So I'm sure that that's what's going on now. And I think the only thing that surprises me is that the Democrats continue to take the bait and they continue to play the game with them. I think that if they were intelligent, what they would do is they would call their bluff. They would do absolutely nothing. They would just say, yeah, I think that they should be very public about it and say, look, you want to run the country off the edge of the cliff, you do it and let the world know that you're the ones that are responsible for it. And let them just twist in the wind and see what happens. But this is a silly game that they play. The only other thing that surprises me is that it's this Republican Party that's doing it, because usually the traditional Republicans who are very publicly concerned about fiscal responsibility and that kind of thing like to use this as a propaganda tool. But now that we've got a crazy Republican Party, I mean, not that both parties aren't crazy in my view, but this one is crazier. I'm kind of surprised that they've decided to elevate this issue, to the level that they have.
Well, Dwight McKee, thank you so much, Attorney Mark Fancher. Something is going on, because even in the CNN town hall meeting, former President Trump, when asked about default, he said, let it go into default. It's like they're willing to crash the system. Now, Mark, I don't know if you disagree with that. Not that you want to see the system destroyed, but you certainly want something just in its place. What do you think is going on here, Dwight?
Well, that is the system, Mark. The system this is not a game that they play. This is the strategy that both parties have in order to justify taking money out of the pockets of the poor and cutting social programs to protect the value of the dollar. Is that this dollar is on the way of going the way of the Confederate dollar. The Confederacy had their own dollars back in the day, but after the war they had no value. And in value of dollars is measured in supply and demand. And so what the debt ceiling does is really negotiate the amount of money that you can print to pay off your debt. But in order to maintain the value of that money, you have to take some money out of circulation. And so I was saying the other week, y'all crowd, that we could start singing Calvary, because they're going to put us on the altar. We're going to be on that cross, y'all.
What do you mean?
And the Democrats...
What do you mean? Who's going to be on the cross?
Well, for those of us who say communion, we sing the song, say, Calvary, Calvary, surely he died on Calvary. That's what they're going to do with us, is they're going to put us on Calvary, that we're going to pay the price for inflation. And they're going to put us on this cross of fiscal responsibility at our expense. And those people that take the bulk of the money, the military-industrial complex and the health care and the prison-industrial complex and all those who take money off the top, they want to maintain their positions. And so they're going to make sure that money is in play. But for the rest of us at the bottom of the rung, they're going to protect the value of that money by taking our money out of circulation. And so we're going to probably see major cuts in Social Security, or as in Europe, in France, where they want to add some years to when you retire, or money out of, health care, whatever they think they need to do in order to protect the value of the money. That's the role of the Federal Reserve, is protect the value of the money. And the reason it's real is because the debt ceiling is really a mythology, because you can print, the federal government has the right to print unlimited money. So they can always print enough money to pay the bills. So that's not the issue. The issue is, can they print enough money and maintain the value of the money to pay the bills? And that's when you have to take the money out of circulation, and that's when we become the scapegoats in the process.
Call us at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. What do you think is going to happen with the debt ceiling? What do you think is going to happen? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. So, everybody, I want to hear what your thoughts are. Today about this. The 14th Amendment, Larry Tribe has weighed in on this. Attorney Hoffler, I only have about 4 minutes left in this segment, so I want to give a couple minutes to you and to Aaron. What about this? First of all, do you think we're going to go into default, CK? And why bring the 14th Amendment into this? Attorney Hoffler? Okay, well, Attorney Aaron Connolly? Aaron?
Well, I think it's interesting. We see some moves in the last few days where our representatives are getting frustrated with their own process, right? And Mark Fancher, I think, explained it very, very well in saying that we've seen this movie before, right? We've seen this debt ceiling drama play out, orchestrated by Republicans, holding us hostage, creating this chaos, and we haven't always played it off in the best way, sometimes better than others. But the reality is, especially right now, people are more nervous than ever about world events, about inflation, about their health, when they're reading headlines about big cuts to Social Security that could come for the folks that, in many cases, are their parents, that they're caregiving, that they see what these medical bills are and understand that 20 to 30% increase is a lot of money for a senior on a fixed income with any sort of health challenge, right? Especially in times when food is more expensive, when medication is more expensive. So they're playing a dangerous game here, and we saw some bipartisan legislation this week. Republicans and Democrats came together to say that congressional representatives should forego a paycheck. They would not get paid if the nation defaults on their debt. And so I think that's a welcome accountability piece for the American people that can at least say, if you're voting against this, you want to get paid and you're defaulting for us, we're going to experience financial chaos while you guys are collecting a paycheck for not doing your jobs. So I think that's an interesting piece that is a bipartisan piece of legislation where Republicans standing up and saying, we can't do this anymore. This is nonsense, and it puts us at risk. It's a national security risk right now. Look at our standing in the world. Look at the value of our dollar on the world stage. Look at what's happening going into this summit in Japan, as Santita mentioned, right? We need to project more power than we are. And if we're fighting amongst ourselves and willfully defaulting on our debt and driving off a financial cliff, that does not signal strength.
Well, I mean, I want to know what is going on in your estimation, Dwight, Dr. D. I mean, what's really going on here? Because we're watching more and more nations organize under the BRICS umbrella. We're watching more and more nations de-dollarize. And now, while you're having the G7 summit, well, China's having their own summit with some Far Eastern European nations. I mean, the world is moving on. We're only 4.5% of the world, and we're missing 95% of the information, Dwight. Because this story is being handled very differently elsewhere. 2 minutes.
Well, the only role of money is to buy goods and services. And if you're not making goods or providing services, then your money has no value. What the United States did, and did successfully after World War II, is to put everybody on a dollar standard. So many of the countries on dollar standard, so that the major resources that you bought, you had to convert into dollars, and to buy them through the dollars, and the Federal Reserve or the Treasury kept the difference. It's like in the temple in Jesus' time, where in order for you to buy a turtle dove, you had to convert your money into shekels, and buy a turtle dove or a lamb, which is why he beat the thieves out of the marketplace. It's the same principle. So now what the world has discovered is because the United States is exporting its manufacturing, and because it provides no service for military service, folk in the world who are making things now and selling things now see no need for the dollar as an intercessor currency. And so they are negotiating directly with themselves. Part of it is United States using this currency as sanctions. And every time they get upset with a country, they sanction them and begin to play with the money and upset the economy. And so you have situations like Cuba and Guatemala and Iran, where they manipulated the money, they sanctioned the people, and really created hardship for the people. And so what you're seeing now is two things. One is
hold that thought.
People looking to get off of the...
Hold that thought. We'll talk about de-dollarization on the other side. You know, I got a hard break. I want you to call me at 773-763-9278. What do you think is going to happen with this debt ceiling? Who is going to get the short straw? Will it be working people or will it be the billionaires? Two guesses, and the first one doesn't count. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show, everybody, July 15th through the 19th. Great Push International Conference. Cannot wait to see you there. Back in just a few minutes on the Santita Jackson Show. All right.
PK, I just want you to know for the record.
She left.
That Soul Train. Oh, she left? Okay.
But what did you want to say about Soul Train? You always want to hear some.
I was going to tell her that Soul Train used to be a local show, coming 5 days a week, and we used to go after school. And the first act was the Emotions, who was in our youth division, who's still like our little sisters.
Wasn't that wonderful?
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh! And on Channel 26, of course, Aaron, you wouldn't remember this, but Mark, you would. When you went, to UHF, you had to stand on one side of the room.
I'd love to be that.
Oh, no. When it was a local show, you had to stand on one. Everybody had to be on one side of the room in order to get the picture. Oh man, it was great. And then I wanted to see if our babysitters were going to be on there because they were all going there after school. So you were like on the is there anyone you know? Oh, because of course, my goodness, I was barely in grammar school, so let alone high school. That was like that was the Black American Bandstand. No joke. It was a local show. Oh man.
They came on right after school. Everybody left school and went there and boogied at about 3 o'clock. We'd all meet down at town. And it was hosted by Clinton Jent.
I thought he was the replacement host. I thought it was first Don Cornelius. And then Clinton Jent became the replacement.
Was first, but then when we were all going, when it was really the popular local show, Clinton Jent was who hosted most of the day because Don was still on the radio.
Okay.
Don was on WBON.
Oh, yeah. See, every time I saw Clinton Jent, I was like, well, where's Don? Where's Mr. Cornelius? Where is he?
Yeah, Don was on BON, and he was a policeman still.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, well, in Nashville, pre-Soul Train, there was a show called Night Train that used to come on Saturday nights, and it probably wasn't that late. It probably came on like about 10:30 or something. But I was strictly forbidden from staying up late to watch that. You know, that was when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And I remember my older brother was babysitting me one Saturday night, and he let me stay up to see Night Train. And, man, I thought I was the baddest mofo around town.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, I love it. That is too rich. That is too rich. But you know what? I watched, you know what? After collection, I would go back to my father's office and watch American Bandstand because they came on at 11 o'clock. Central Standard Time. Look, I loved it all. But then I think it was at 1 or 2, Soul Train came on. Oh, by that time I was going to be home. Oh, from Push, because we had our Saturday morning forum. Oh, I couldn't wait. Who's going to be on? Who's going to be on this week? Oh. Everybody loved Soul Train. It was great. That was a great show. And remember when they actually had live music? Oh, man. It was great. It was great. I remember when Al Green went on there live. Oh, goodness gracious. It was great. It was just great.
Coming back in 30.
But let's go to de-dollarization, Dwight. And we got a new nickname for Mark, Night Train.
I will wear that name proudly.
I'm not mad at you. Oh, I love it. Night Train. I can't believe it. Did you have a fro?
Oh, yeah. I mean, by the time
Change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Thank you so much for that. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show, WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. It is May 19th, Brother Malcolm's birthday. Malcolm X's birthday. God bless him. They're having a big event up in New York tonight. I'm sending Malcolm X's family so much love, so much love. Boy, oh boy. What a magnificent family they are. Dr. Betty Shabazz, what a magnificent woman she was, and she will always, and they will always live on in our memories. And we just thank God for all of their love and sacrifice. Let's talk about this debt ceiling. 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. I want to know what your thoughts are. What do you think is going to happen here? And this is all happening as we're watching a changing economic landscape. Dwight McKee, of course, you and attorney Mark Fancher, also known as Night Train Fancher, and attorney Aaron Connolly. Inside joke, everybody. You got to all be on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. This is back in the day when he had a fro, when he was, because we had our soul trains in different cities. He was in Nashville. Boom, boom, boom. Love it. I love it. And attorney Aaron Connolly, who watched Soul Train. Thank you. The most successful syndicated show in the history of American television. Thank you very much. Everybody's Soul Train. Please, even Wolf Blitzer took over the mic the day that Don Cornelius died. He had to talk about him all day. And because you remember he used to participate in the Soul Train Awards. You remember that? The award shows? Because everybody loves Soul Train. But talk to me about what's happening now as we're watching the economic landscape change. Dwight, you were talking about that on the other side of the break as we're watching de-dollarization. Many American and Western economists have poo-pooed the idea, but de-dollarization continues to happen. And I think is it in Iran they said we will not accept American currency anymore? I mean, that's becoming a real thing, Dwight.
Yeah, in America is really trying to get past it by, going to electric cars, so we don't have to deal with so many petrodollars and trying to get a hold on the chip industry. But when you got your manufacturing, which is what we did, in order to begin to extract profits from the poor nations by using them as a cheap labor base, then you run the risk of violating your own supply chain. And you also, the net impact of that is you also create real economies and other countries that become competing economies. And so now they get so that, they're creating the things that they need for themselves. They really don't need you, much less your money, to bother and negotiate. And so at one level internationally, you run into the de-dollarization, but then at another level, nationally, you run the inflation because you're still printing money because now you have to print more and more money to deal with the goods and services that the government needs to operate. And so that money becomes inflated, therefore less valuable. And how do you protect that? Is you have to take some money out of circulation, which is what deflation is taking money out of circulation. And that leaves you with, where does that money come from? Does it come from the top and the rich? Do you tax the billionaires for that money? Or do you extract it out of the behinds of the poor and those who are the middle class? And I suggest that even the Republicans and the Democrats, this is a pretext for them to take the money out of the bottom of the economy because they all, for the most part, are defenders of the status quo. And so I think it's going to be at the expense of us. I like to hear, Mark's opinion on that.
Hold on. I want to go to some of these callers because they want to weigh in after having heard you and Aaron and CK and everybody talk, and Attorney Mark Fancher talk about this. Andre, what's on your mind today? Andre.
Hello, good morning, Santita. How are you and the guests doing?
Great hearing your voice.
Thank you very much. My comment concerning the debt ceiling is this here. McCarthy is acting as if he got a mandate to do this. But if you look at the midterm, how Republicans lost, and then you look at the election where they lost by so many millions of votes, so 80 million people voted for Joe Biden. So if anything, I think that Joe Biden is the one that holds the hands as far as the mandate goes with this. And it's wrong, and they shouldn't be using this debt ceiling as a bargaining chip, because it's not mandated by the people. Joe Biden has the mandate in his favor, and they should just hold out. That's my comment about that, Santita.
All right. Well, I mean, I hear you. I hear you. The tax doctor, what's on your mind today?
Good morning. Great show. I haven't called in because I had a stroke, so I'm recuperating from my stroke.
How are you doing?
So, I'm good. I'm a little better. It's hard to walk, but thank God I'm still here. I'm still able to tune you in and listen to your fantastic show. Let me say this. It is a grand shame that the Republicans have decided that they want the rich to get richer and they want the poor to stay poor. And they want to run this country into the ground because there's a thing called racism that they don't want their tax dollars to be used to help us, but it's okay for our tax dollars to help them. And if you live in a blue state, you send more money to Washington than red states. And the father, there's more crime in red states than in blue states. But if you hear the Republicans tell it, it's the blue states that got all the problems. It's the blue state that got all the folks on welfare. The folks, that ain't the case. It's the blue states that's holding up this country. And just like in Illinois, where you got folks in Southern Illinois want to succeed from Illinois, if they did that, they wouldn't last one day. Because it's Chicago who send more money to Springfield than the other counties. So once again, you got that blue county, which is Cook County. You got the blue states that send more money to Washington. And folks, if we sit back and let these folks bamboozle us over this excellent, then you know what? We need to be had. Thank you, Santita.
We are being bamboozled, Aaron. Because they're balancing this on our backs.
No, we are. And when we look at, the population of cities, when we look at the population of these blue states, the taxes being collected, the job creation, the entrepreneurs, the innovation, the caller's absolutely right. And, we allow this narrative sometimes to be louder than it should be. So I appreciate that point, right? And when we look at a state like California, for example, that has more people than so many states combined, and yet their Senate representation is just the same as every other state, that doesn't make a lot of sense in our modern world either. So we have a lot to consider with regard to how our resources and our representation is set up in this country.
What's interesting? I mean, you all are bringing up some really interesting points. It's interesting to me. I mean, this is when we get down to the economics and really, just what slavery really has been about, Mark Fancher, that the debt ceiling would be tied to the 14th Amendment. I don't think that's something that should be lost on people. Because now you have a lot of discussions about who built the United States, and everybody's made their contribution, but who built the foundation and built the infrastructure and filled in the flesh and the bones and the tendon and all that, that's been black people. And it's not with free labor, it was with unpaid labor, Mark.
Oh, certainly, and there's a great irony in it, in that the 14th Amendment was intended to address issues related to those who were enslaved and formerly enslaved. At this moment, presumably, there are efforts to try and use that amendment again to try and presumably protect people who are descendants of those people. But I do think we need to be mindful of what Dwight outlined for us earlier, that this may not really be a contest between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. It may really be a contest between capitalists and workers and poor people. And that regardless of party label, there are those who are seeking to really enhance the power, the wealth of those who already have both of those things. And I think that we really also ought to be mindful of the fact that when it comes to that issue of protecting the value of currency, that people, who are in a position to try and control those things have absolutely no mercy. They're absolutely vicious. And I think we have to look no further than what the French did to Libya and Gaddafi not that long ago. There have been many references over the years to Hillary Clinton's infamous emails. Those are posted on the State Department's website, and you can go and look at them. And there are several of them that include exchanges between her staff and representatives of the French government. And they're talking quite frankly about Muammar Gaddafi's proposal to create an independent Pan-African currency that was backed by gold from Libya. Mm-hmm. And they spoke in very frank terms about the fact that this would completely devalue the franc, the French currency, and that something needed to be done about it. And there are not so veiled references to their plan to go in there and take him out for purposes of protecting their currency, and also, and they speak in very frank terms, about their interest in getting his oil. So you see what happened to Gaddafi. He was disemboweled by a bayonet, by a gang of thugs that were financed and directed by the U.S. and the French. And if they're willing to go to those kinds of lengths, then I think they certainly would be willing to do whatever they're going to do to protect themselves in this country by sacrificing the interests of the poor. But I also wonder and question whether they will do something that radical and dramatic within the context of this issue and this controversy that's happening right now. They'll find other ways to do it, but they have done this before without such drastic consequences. And I guess only time will tell whether this will be the exception.
I mean, so where do we go from here, Dwight McKee? I mean, what's going to happen? I mean, what do you foresee June 1st?
Hold on, it's going to be a bumpy ride, you all. What I see June 1st is I see concessions under the guise of we had no choice, that they were going to sacrifice the economy and the all the prestige and the power of the United States was at risk, and we had to maintain our place in the world affairs. And so the Democrats would say we had no choice but to submit. And we wouldn't have done it otherwise, but keep voting for us. And, and we'd keep on playing the same game over and over again. But we want to hold on to your votes, and we want to act like we was fighting in your best interests. But the fact of the matter, we sat down in that room and planned all of this, long ago, that we knew that somebody had to go, somebody had to pay the price, and it wasn't going to be our crowd. We already knew that, but it was going to be your crowd. I think where we go from here is I think we have to be prepared to the same way we've been prepared the last 400 years to deal with the reality of our situation. We're creative enough, and they know that, and we're resourceful enough that we'll make it through. With God's grace and our ingenuity, we'll make it through, and they know that, and so that's what we have to be prepared for, to really make it through.
I mean, Aaron, the cuts that they're proposing are going to be devastating, just devastating. And I'm wondering how the American electorate is going to react, particularly in this time in which people have had it up to here. I'm looking up to the sky. I mean, how much more can people take? I mean, you're going to take more food off people's tables. I mean, you're going to...
Right.
I mean, it's just... I mean, think about that. I mean, your baby's not going to be able to eat. I mean, people are already rationing food, meds, all of that. They're asking Americans to do more. Requiring it.
Well, and we had a conversation, as a senator from John Fetterman from Pennsylvania, and he was saying, you're literally asking me to cut food subsidies for people that literally need it. This is not something that folks want to do, that folks desire to do, is to go on SNAP. It's a difficult process to get approved. It's a lifeline for folks. We've taken away the biggest tool in our toolbox to eliminate levels of poverty in this country with the earned income tax credit for families already. So this is not only, these cuts are happening at a time when people received government support during COVID. They see that it was a pretty easy process. They understand the PPP loan process, and they see their congressional representatives getting hundreds of thousands of dollars in free interest, loans that don't get paid back at all. And we're in a fight for, student loan forgiveness at the same time. So this is an electorate that understands that government can do more, and that they're making choices to give folks like billionaires who are doing stock buybacks while firing their employees, right? So the people understand this, and it's going to be, I think, a bigger reaction from the tried and true voters in the Republican Party. When you look at some of these cuts to Social Security, this is their electorate. These are seniors who need help, who are lower income, which, let's have this conversation. Most of the folks that need these subsidies are low-income, non-college white folks that live in rural areas, that are aging rapidly, and qualify for a lot of the government programs that they don't themselves support or vote for. But when they're cut, that's a different story. And we will see the AARP in full force, and some other big movements that have huge constituencies and huge money behind it. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out if they really double down on these cuts.
I mean, Mark Fancher, if they double down on these cuts, what do you expect to see?
Well, I think that it's really sort of inevitable that if not now and in this context, that there is going to be great hardship. There is going to be disasters simply because, and people don't like to hear me say it, the U.S. is an empire and empires fall. And this one is going to fall. It's going to crumble. There is no real long-term future for the United States. I know I prophet of doom and gloom, but that's what history tells us. And the U.S. empire continues to play itself out in that way. It has spread itself thin with respect to its military involvement. It has exported its manufacturing and production capacity. It has left vast numbers of people in the country without support and without assistance and without help. So it goes, for me, it's beyond the question of what happens right now with respect to the debt ceiling. It's a question of what real people, what people who have been historically oppressed, people who are workers and people who are members of marginalized communities, what are we going to do to save ourselves? It's not a question of saving this country in its current form. It is what do we do? And I do think that it does come down to what has always been on the table, and that is the need to establish an independent base of power by various means. And that means looking beyond the borders of the United States and establishing relationships and alliances with people who share an understanding of imperialism and its impact on the world, the impact of global capitalism on the world, and the devastating impact that it has had on real people. And I think by building those types of relationships and developing strategies with them without just limiting ourselves to trying to figure out what the Democratic Party can do, the Democratic Party is part of the problem. They're part of the empire, and they need to go the same way as any other aspect of it. And I think that that's where we need to go, because we are going to face hardship. It's just a question of how we're going to survive it. And I think, as Dwight said, we will survive it because God's on our side. He wants us to survive, but we've got to do our part.
Dwight McKee, the last 2 minutes belong to you.
Well, I think the mark is absolutely on point. This is a reckoning, and when you tie this into the other things, other issues you see in the country, the climate change, the impact on climate in terms of these floods and fires, when you look at the immigration issue, where people are coming in who have to be sustained from all over the hemisphere, when you look at, the various disease issues that we're dealing with and the mental health issues that we're dealing with, the mass shootings, it's a reckoning. And what you're seeing is really in live and living person, the fall of a great empire, and I say great pejoratively, but you're seeing, you reap what you sow. And the country that has been, that became great based on plunder and racism and slavery is really in many ways reaping what they sow. It could never sustain itself because it was never built on truth and love and justice. And so the Bible is correct, boys. You sow the wind, you reap the whirlwind. And I think that's kind of really what we're looking at.
Is there any way, Dr. King more than 50 years ago was saying we're at a point where we can turn around and we can get things on the right track. Have we gone past the point of no return, as you said, as he prophesied? Look, this is where we can end up, but we don't have to go there if we turn from our wicked ways.
That's the key word. We'd have to repent. We'd have to turn from our wicked ways and confess, make amends with the people we violated and stole from, and willing to give up all of the bounty that we stole and achieved, and reconcile ourselves with the brothers that we have so profoundly violated and exploited. And no, we're not willing to do that because greed is, as they used to say in the 80s, they think greed is a good thing. You know, they think that by divine rights of kings, that few have the right by divine mandate to be in charge and to own everything. And the real symbol of where Western civilization is looking at that carriage last week, that gold carriage. It really almost looked like a parody. It really looked like something when you looked at Prince Charles in that crown. It really looked like the cover of Mad magazine back in the day when What We Worry, Alfred was there. It was strangely familiar.
Mr. Newman.
And it reminded me of...
You know what? Stay right
Alfred,
there.
you do what?
I'm gonna get something on the other side so I get some proper closing comments from you. Yeah, I love you, everybody. Thank you, Paul, for a great show. WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. See you on Keep Up Alive on Sunday at 7 a.m. July 15th through the 19th, Rainbow Push International Conference. Can't wait to see you there. Go to rainbowpush.org and call 773-FREEDOM. Love you, everybody. Have a great day. Dwight McKee, no, you didn't go to Alfred E. Newman with that kooky look on his face.
It looks just like him. It looks just like him. Just like him.
No, he is R-O-N-G. Just don't pay any attention, Aaron. He's just wrong. But I think they were
I'm
on
taking notes. Aaron, you know where Alfred Newman is? Aaron. You know where Alfred E. Newman is?
Oh, I think Aaron might have gone to take her son's school.
Oh.
Who? Who?
All right, Mark, you know where Alfred E. Newman is?
Oh, absolutely. I just loved that comparison. I said I'm taking notes on
just like him in that crown and that
he lost the front tooth, man. that would seal the deal.
Oh my gosh, that was so rich. I loved it. I said, oh no, he didn't do that. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. Of course he did. Bless your heart. Well, here we are, and now they're going to trade away everything on the backs of people. And it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing, but this is where we are. But maybe this is going to get people to wake up. How about that? Maybe. Crisis creates opportunity. Reverend would not have run for president but for Ronald Reagan. How my brother Jesse put it so well. He said, he was the only one who was courageous enough to stand up to him. Because, Reagan cut such an imposing figure. People were actually afraid of him. Because, just all the Hollywood panache and all of that, and then he won in such a big way. And yet, you had little David come up with his little rock. And oh boy, completely changed history. But I don't want it to be lost on everyone. Everyone thinks that, oh my goodness, he gave us a black president. Reverend did much more than that. And Bernie Sanders was on my show, Mark Fancher, saying this. He said, no doubt that it was important for Reverend to smash the color barrier, but he did something at least as important. He said he made space for a white progressive like me. Had it not been for him, there would be no me. I think, that's where we have to rise above kind, and, to rise above color and get to kind. What kind of person are you? What do you stand for? What do you stand for? I've kept hearing Mark and Dwight people say, oh, I want someone in the White House who looks like me. I'm like, really? You have someone on the Supreme Court prior to Ketanji Brown Jackson. You had someone who looked like you. How did that work out for you?
Mm-hmm.
Aren't you tired of that?
Yeah, and for me, the thing that lots of things I appreciated about Reverend Jackson, but one of the things that I really appreciated was the image that he projected of our community globally. Because I think sometimes in oppressed regions of the world, people lapse into a perception or a belief that black people, people of color generally, in the United States are somehow well off, that they're living the life, that they don't share the same concerns about oppression that people in struggling countries share. And, Reverend Jackson was able to really demonstrate the nature of the struggle globally in a way that people in these other countries could relate to so readily, and they embraced him so joyfully. In 1984, I was on a solidarity tour to Nicaragua, when the Sandinistas were under siege by the Reagan administration. And
you were down there. My mother was down there, too, during the campaign in January, yes.
Wow.
He went to Syria. That? She went to Nicaragua. Oh, my God. Yeah. I stayed home because, when I was, in case something happened.
Yeah. Well, when I was there, everywhere I went, people, they were just absolutely convinced that Reverend Jackson was going to win the presidency, because in their minds, there was nobody that could possibly be better than him. I just think that was a testament to the level of esteem that he enjoyed.
Well, I think, I think you're right. But, those were our politics. Of course, you would know of Jack Odell, one of the great unsung heroes of the Civil Rights Movement, indeed one of the architects of the New America. And he was of such great import that John Kennedy told Dr. King of his communist ties. And many people at the turn of the century, you had socialists, you had communists, you had everybody in the United States, because it was a time of tremendous social and economic tumult. And people were looking for answers, right? And so, as a seaman, Jack Odell, and as a great intellectual, he thought about all kinds of political systems and social and cultural systems that would work and make America just and fair. And so, bottom line, he asked Dr. King to let him go. He said, you need to do that, otherwise the movement's going to be smeared. And Dr. King was always sensitive to that. So, but then Mark, as Dwight would remember, the person who hired him when my mother and Dwight and others started Operation Push, he hired Jack Odell, and he was our director of international affairs. And my perspective on the world, aside from my mom and my dad, absolutely shaped by Jack Odell. And I could say that of you, Dwight, would you not?
Yeah, well, Jack was my mentor, and people don't know he was professor at Antioch, and had a great influence on Mrs. King when she was there. I remember that me and your dad went to Antioch and did the keynote for graduation. Mrs. King had him come there. But Jack Odell was a great, great, great intellectual, and was one of the chief writers and publishers of Freedom Ways.
Absolutely.
Which is a classic.
Absolutely.
One of the regrets I have today is that when Lerone died, they were selling his Freedom Ways, and I didn't get a chance to really pick them up. I think University of Chicago bought them.
Of course they did.
Of course they did.
Of course they did.
But Jack, Freedom Ways is a tremendous publication. Even today, it's a tremendous publication. But Jack was a real mentor of mine.
And an absolute freedom fighter. And so when you saw Reverend running, that was Jack Odell. And that perspective that we offered. Because, Mark, many black people are not progressive. Many of us are. A good chunk of us are not, in terms of our international affiliations. I mean, when my parents were calling for Palestinian justice and Israeli security, I mean, we took a real hit on that. That was the hit I took in my Harvard interview, the hits that we were taking organizationally. Dead animals were put on our offices in California, all of that. Even the people who were harassing Reverend during his campaign. It was Rabbi Meir Kahana, and it was just all of that. And you had a lot of progressive Jewish allies who we had, Carolyn Kasdan and others. Carolyn Kasdan was on our staff forever. So you can't just smear and paint the Jewish community with that. That would be unfair. It would be a lie. Mark Weiner. I mean, there's some people who came for us and who absolutely shielded us. But we know the right wing, and the right wing exists everywhere. We know what happened. And running for president and lifting up the banner of the ANC and saying, no, we need to free Mandela. That was a big deal because Mandela was considered to be, he was classified as a terrorist even when he was president of South Africa. So Reverend was saying, you need to speak to the Sandinistas. So when Daniel Ortega came to the United States, Mark, we hosted him at our house in Chicago and had a big reception for him. The only time, every time you saw Yasser Arafat, he had a taster with him. They would not let him drink water unless someone else drank it first, the glass. When he came to my parents' home in Washington, number one, he honored us by coming to my parents' home, to our home in Washington. And then he looked at my mother and father and he asked someone to bring him a glass of lemonade. So they poured him the glass of lemonade and he lifted the glass to everyone before him and he drank it. Oh my gosh. He said, that's how much I trust this man, his wife, and his family. I thank them for standing up for us because I know the price that he paid. And you know what, Mark and Dwight? I do it over and over and over and over and over again because it was the right thing to do. The right thing to do. You want to be on the right side of history. I don't want God to be on my side. I want to be on God's side. How about that? I don't want to bring God down to me. I want to rise up to God. A lot of the songs we sing are real off. God is on our side. No, we got to be on God's side. Because we're too limited, too human, so disconnected from our divinity to really get it. Everybody, nobody should be treated the way the people who live under the boot in this world are treated. No one in Scientific American should be writing an op-ed piece saying that there are too many people in this world. No one who helps to write the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, yes, that's Dr. Emanuel, should say at 75 you don't need to get any more medical treatments because you've lived your life. Are you serious right now? And the woman who wrote the article in Scientific American who said that the world will be in a better place when there are fewer people, and Prince William said the same thing. I'm like, well, are you going to go first? Be my guest. Since the world can do without people, then you go on. You be my example. I don't want you to do that, but are you serious right now? What is this? You all need to call this stuff what it is. It's evil. It's wicked. Reverend Evans, Dwight and I had the same pastor all of our lives. I've never seen God make a mouth he couldn't feed. God is too wise to make a mistake and too kind to be cruel. We need to get right. Our thinking is off, and we're paying attention to people who are wicked to the core. How dare you say there are too many people on earth? How dare you? Who are you to do that? Are you serious? It's like my mother said, when your father and I had all five of you, we couldn't afford any of you. Who do you want me to put back? As you came, you were welcome. Cut us in or cut it out. You shouldn't be taking food off of somebody's table, taking food out of somebody's mouth. And you ought to have enough of your sense of your somebodiness to say that this is wrong. Instead of looking around at your neighbor and saying that they're welfare queens and on and on and on and on. I mean, come on, really? We gotta do right. Because this is This is what this is coming down to. Who's going to eat, who's not going to eat? Who's going to live, who's not going to live? That's where we are, kids. I love you. I can't wait to, hey, Laura, you say very on point. Hey, I'm just telling you. Get on God's side. Get on God's side. I want God to say, I'm glad you were with me. Okay? All right? That's what I want to do. Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to say before we go? Mark, Dwight, Night Train?
Well, I'll just say amen to all you said and wish you a very good weekend.
Okay, Night Train.
Dwight, take it slow. All right.
Night Train. I will never, I'm envisioning him with this big afro doing his thing right now. I can't believe it.
Well, I don't know about doing my thing, but I had the afro, though.
Well, that's doing your thing. I had an afro, too. Back in the day, yes, I did. Wantu Wazuri, use afro sheen.
Use afro sheen.
Beautiful people, use afro sheen. Those are great commercials. Come on. And we were loving it. And the bigger the afro, oh, my gosh, yes, back in the day. That's right. Oh, boy, oh, boy. I love you all. Night Train, love you. Dwight McKee, Dr. D.
Shalom. Okay.
God bless you. Love you all. Oh, my goodness. God bless you. Love you, everybody. See you on Sunday on Keep Up Alive. Bye.